You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back and heading south and east from Minnesota. David Dewitt is back with us. He is editor-in-chief of the Ohio Capital Journal. He's been covering what's been going on in that state for longer than he probably wants to admit now. And, he's been one of our most important guides to that very important state. David, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Edwin. It's really nice to join you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk.
So, you know what? I'm optimistic. I was optimistic when I started today, and the guy on before you, Ken Martin, is the head of the Democratic Party in Minnesota, where they have done unbelievable things. And so I'm optimistic again about what can be done, and that gives me the courage to talk to Ohio.
Boy, Edwin, it's funny. I was talking to our editor of the Minnesota Reformer at an editor's retreat earlier this summer, and it's really cool to see everything that they're doing in Minnesota. It seems like they're trying to do a lot of good stuff for the people there, and they're focused on impact and policy and important things like that. So I'm glad that you had that discussion, because Minnesota is doing some cool things that maybe one day we can do in Ohio.
I'm going to predict that you're going to get to, and here's why. We had an off-cycle Supreme Court election in Wisconsin that, might, after more than a decade, put the Democrats at least from defense to offense. And I feel like August 8th, right around the corner, might be that moment in Ohio. Talk about that.
Well, it very well could be, honestly, and I've got an interesting anecdote about that. First
David, let me interrupt you one time just for 1 second, and I apologize. I jumped into August 8th without any background. Will you fill everybody in?
Oh, absolutely. So on August 8th, Ohioans have a historic election. This is a once-in-a-lifetime election for people. This is a once-in-a-lifetime decision for Ohio voters. It's over the rights we've had for 111 years, and that's why I say it's once in a lifetime. This is a historic attack, really, on Ohio voter power. 111 years ago in 1912, after really a nationally significant election in Ohio about our Constitution, this was an era where if there were cable news, it would have been on every network. Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech that is canonized in American history about the importance of democracy. And it was at a time during the first Gilded Age, and I'd argue we're in a second Gilded Age now, where the progressive era was really asserting itself against government corruption, against industry controlling people, against industry exploiting workers in many ways. And the people had decided they had enough. So what they did was they had a constitutional convention. They enshrined powers in the Ohio Constitution. They did this in other states, Oregon, South Dakota, prominently through the history. And what they said was, we have ultimate authority over our Ohio Constitution. We as Ohioans, we're a party that's about people power. We're a party that looks out for people and families themselves. And they had a constitutional convention. Teddy Roosevelt gave a great speech. William Jennings Bryan gave a great speech as well. And what they said was, we need people power. And so Ohio citizens voted by 57% of the vote to give ourselves the power of initiative in a referendum. Prior to this point, we did not have that power. So with 57% of the vote, they passed this. And since then, Ohioans have had ultimate authority, majority, simple majority, democratic voter power, small d democratic, not political party, but democracy, power over our Constitution. And we've had this for 111 years, and it was meant to check a corrupt, unaccountable legislature and to make sure that the ultimate voice, the ideals of American democracy, were represented through the voice of the people. And so we had this, we have had it for 111 years, and now, for the first time in Ohio history, a legislature and our politicians are launching an assault on the power of the voters in Ohio to amend our Constitution. And they're doing that with this proposal on August 8th to raise the bar for passing constitutional amendments from 50% to 60%. And they're also raising the signature threshold from 5% of the previous governor's election in 44 counties to all 88 counties. And so what this creates, what this would create, what it seeks to create, is a situation where 40% of voters, a minority, can veto anything that a majority of people want, and any one given county out of 88 in Ohio can veto anything that 87 counties want in Ohio. And so it's a pretty obvious big government power grab by entrenched state house lobbyists and lawmakers who might not agree with the majority of people on various issues, who might not want the majority of Ohioans to say, this is how it has to be. And because they don't want a majority of people to have say, they are now attacking the fundamental right of majority voters to go to the polls and hold our legislature accountable.
And they're doing this, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because pretty soon after this vote, there's going to be a vote on women's reproductive freedom. And they really want to keep abortion illegal.
Right. Yes. So that's a key element of this. And it's an important thing to kind of discuss because they are very motivated by preventing abortion rights from being put into the Constitution. They watched Michigan and Kansas and other states pass abortion rights amendments last year with 55% of the vote, 57% of the vote, 59% of the vote. What those states didn't reach is 60%. So all of a sudden you have Ohio lawmakers coming back and saying, and our Secretary of State and the anti-abortion lobby and the most powerful lobbyists in our state coming out to say, wait a second, these states majority voter authority. They asserted the rights of the people to say, this is what we actually want. Our legislature is being misrepresentative, and we want a representative laws in our state, so we will enshrine abortion rights. And they're very motivated by that. But I think it's important to point out, as much as this is for them about abortion rights specifically, and it's why they're making this wild, radical attack on the Constitution because of November, this is also about every other issue that could ever possibly impact Ohioans. This is about we have constitutional amendments in Ohio that didn't pass by 60%, but were supported by a majority of voters on casino laws, on property taxes, on bond issues. This does not
on gerrymandering.
On gerrymandering. This is not just about abortion, really. This is about everything. This is about a majority of voters' ability to have their say about anything. But they are very motivated and doing this specifically to prevent women from having access to abortion health care. We've seen horror stories. The law they're trying to protect is the 10-year-old rape victim who had to flee Ohio for abortion care. The women who were cancer patients who were not allowed to have cancer treatments because they were pregnant, but were not allowed to abort their fetuses because of this law. They're trying to protect a law that has caused tremendous trauma and pain upon people, and they're doing it by attacking democracy itself. They're attacking people's power itself.
So this was fabulous background. And with that background, and then we might add it's probably an illegal election anyway, because I think you banned August elections. But with that background, now let's go back to where we began. I'm optimistic that something amazing is happening in Ohio.
Yes. Yeah. And so to revert to what I was previewing before,
Right.
You know me. We've talked about this before. I'm always nervous. I always expect the worst. I will not be satisfied that democracy has been protected in Ohio until we run through the finish line and protect it in August here. But polls have come out that show that 57% of people are against this blatant power grab by lobbyists and lawmakers, and only 26% support it, and 17% are undecided. Even the majority of Republicans, 41%, support this as opposed to, or oppose this as opposed to the ones who support it, which is 38%, according to the Suffolk University USA Today poll that just came out this past week. And so you're right to feel optimistic, and to go even further, in accordance with what you were just saying, there's a very good conservative argument to be made for this. A lot of Ohio Republicans call themselves conservatives. They're not conservatives. If you take it from an academic sense, the way that people talk about this in academia, there are conservatives in the Edmund Burkean sense. They believe in empirical facts. They believe in conserving institutions. They do not believe in radical change, and they especially do not believe in radical change based on faulty or misrepresented evidence. In America today, in the last 8 years, since that guy came down the elevator, we've seen the Republican Party abandon the Edmund Burkean sense of conservative politics. They're pure reactionaries. And in the academic sense, what a reactionary is somebody who wants to take away things. They don't believe in conserving. They want to take away voter power. They want to take away human rights. They want to take away civil rights. They want to roll it back, usually to an idealized time in history that's ill-defined and based on faulty history. And they want to take things away from people. They want to roll rights back. And so from the conservative argument, an actual real conservative argument in Ohio, this is a big government power grab. This is big government. This is lobbyists and lawmakers coming out to say, oh, we don't want a majority of people to contradict us. We don't want a majority of people to be able to assert what should be. We want to protect our own. We already get everything that we want all the time because of gerrymandering. So we don't want a majority of people to come out and say, wait a second, that's not what we want. And so this is a big government power grab. And that is how former state representatives like Gene Krebs have written about in our papers, is how former governors like Bob Taft and John Kasich and former Attorney General Betty Montgomery, they believe in democracy. They believe in people power. And they want to conserve our institutions. They don't want to attack and dismantle our Ohio Constitution. And so even these very conservative people who I probably don't agree with on very many things, but we essentially agree on people, democracy, protecting our institutions, and holding politicians accountable. And if we agree on that, that's great, because that is the fundamental from which we can go from everywhere else. So there's a very good conservative argument against this, because it is a power grab.
What about turnout? You know, it's a tough time for an election. The powers that be that are doing this will turn their voters out. They have the money to do it. They have the political machine to do it. Will citizens turn out and vote?
Right. So that's the big thing. And they gave the game away originally when they introduced this in November. They were talking about putting it on the May ballot. And they even said, when we're going to put this historic 100-year change to the Constitution on the May ballot, because we don't want people putting crazy changes to our Constitution on sleepy May primaries. So they gave away that they know that turnout is bad in primaries. And so they wanted to do it in May. They couldn't do it in May. So now they, like you said, they actually by law eliminated August elections just this year. They did it in December. Governor DeWine signed it in December or in January. So they just eliminated August elections. But then they were like, oh, wait, no. Because that vote's in November for the abortion rights thing, we have to get this in place first. So they brought back this August election specifically to try to rig the game against that November vote. And they, as far as the turnout goes, they're relying, in theory, on that low turnout. They're relying on last year in 2022, because of our gerrymandered districts, we had to have a primary in August, and it only had 7.9% turnout. So if you think about it from their perspective, what they're trying to do is get 7.9% of Ohioans to radically change 100 years of Ohio voter power so that 40% of Ohioans can dictate how our government is run to 100% of Ohioans. But here's the flaw. People see through their game. They know what's going on. People aren't dumb. As condescending and cynical as they might be, people are actually pretty intelligent. And so people know that this is a game. They know exactly what they're doing. I've written about this, and many others in the Ohio Press Corps, which has been phenomenal on this issue, have written about this. And we've told people, this is a historic battle, and your whole rights for a century are at stake here. And so we're seeing much higher turnout than we would usually see. And honestly, bad for them. That's not what they were hoping for. They wanted low turnout. They're not getting it.
Wow. So I just think this radical Republican crowd in your state has overplayed their hand, and I think this may be the beginning of the end. If they do this, then there's the abortion rights vote that will follow, and I don't expect that will go their way either, as it hasn't in any other state. And that's the beginning of a push back that, may ultimately break this monopoly in power.
Yeah, and to just circle back again to what I didn't get to, what Gene wrote about, conservative Republican former Ohio lawmaker Gene Krebs wrote about, is he warned them of exactly that. He said, listen, y'all are going too far. You're asking for too much. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense politically. It doesn't make any sense practically. It doesn't make any sense as a patriot. If you care about democracy, it doesn't make any sense as a conservative. If you care about protecting people against big government. And he said, you're overplaying your hand, just the point that you're making. And I'm always nervous, so I don't always know, I always expect the worst. So if anything good happens, I can be pleasantly surprised. But I very much hope that you guys are right, because when I see you saying these things, when I see Gene saying these things, people whose opinions I respect, I really hope that you're right. But I'm still going to run through the finish line.
I appreciate that, and I'm not cautious. On the contrary, I think hard work has to happen every day to get there. But I think people are motivated to do it. And I might add, these are the same. Really, they must hate our country. The same people who tried to damage Ohio State and higher ed in the Ohio legislature, and they got stopped. The bill that passed wasn't the horror show that they wanted to pass. Yeah, and they still haven't gotten through the House yet, too. So it's still not law. And that is probably one of the most significant things about this. They're doing this amidst a backdrop where you have an unconstitutionally seated state legislature, and let me clarify that with some background. So the Ohio Supreme Court declared Ohio's state house maps unconstitutional 5 times. Bipartisan court, led by a Republican Supreme Court justice who cares about democracy, declared our maps unconstitutional 5 times. You have an anti-abortion lobbyist named Mike Gonadakis. He's also advocated for things like puppy mills and just really gross stuff, this dude. He filed a lawsuit to get it out of state court and bring it to a federal court. And he successfully had 2 Trump judges in a split decision say, not that these maps weren't gerrymandered. They never said they weren't gerrymandered.
They acknowledged the Supreme Court's determination that they were gerrymandered, but they just said that the clock has gone so far, we're so close to the 22 election, that you have to use these maps. So they forced unconstitutionally gerrymandered maps on Ohio voters in 2022. We had to go to the polls. We had to vote under these unconstitutional maps. Now we have this legislature who's been sat under unconstitutional maps, gerrymandered maps, and they have pursued the most radical right-wing agenda you could possibly imagine. They have opened up gun laws. They have attacked voter power with our election laws. Our Secretary of State has pulled ourselves out of the voter data checking system to make sure people aren't voting illegally. And now they're launching this and they've done a whole bunch of anti-LGBT laws, which we're seeing across the country, of course, because that's part of the game plan. We have our most radical legislature we've ever seen doing the most authoritarian, un-American, anti-freedom laws that we've ever seen. And now they're going to voters and saying, strangle yourselves. Strangle your own power away to do anything about it. Put your hands around your neck and take away your own authority to give us any accountability so that we can continue to do whatever we want. And I mentioned the anti-abortion lobbyists.
Yep.
Real quickly, he was the guy who filed the federal lawsuit to make our maps unconstitutionally gerrymandered. He's also the guy leading the way on this attack in August on Ohio majority voter power. So they overrode a majority of the bipartisan Supreme Court, and now they want to override a majority of voters.
Yeah. And you've twice also mentioned the Ohio Secretary of State. That's Frank LaRose, right?
Correct. Yes, we have a secretary.
Okay, so you already gave the country J.D. Vance. Now you want to give us Frank LaRose? Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, so imagine this. Imagine a guy who makes his way to office in 2018 by saying that he's going to protect Ohioans against gerrymandering. Enough with the gerrymandering. Everybody knows it's cheating and it's wrong. These are op-eds that he wrote for NBC News in 2018. This is what he's saying. And it's a guy who came out in November and said, we need to eliminate August elections because they're low turnout and they're expensive and fundamental issues should never be decided by voters in an August election. This is a guy who said that he was going to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, and then enacted the most restrictive voter law in America, or among the most restrictive. There are a couple other states that are comparable, but we are now at the top tier of the list of it is hardest to vote in Ohio. So, not easy to vote anymore. August elections are suddenly okay. He also denied that the issue one was about the abortion amendment in November, and now he is literally campaigning with the same anti-abortion lobbyists, campaigning out on the campaign trail, doing events, talking to people about how we must pass.
And now he wants to run for the United States Senate. I have to say, though, he's like a poster child of a Republican senator. Say one thing, do something completely different. I mean, it's a bankrupt party. Bankrupt party. Really, they just, all this noise, they do nothing to make the country better.
Yeah, and he even said in November, he said this is not at all about the abortion amendment. This is about protecting the Ohio Constitution. And then in June, he told a county Republican party at a dinner that Ohio Capitol Journal broke and has the recording of, he said this is 100% about stopping the November abortion amendment. This is a man who can't be trusted on anything. He can't be trusted on gerrymandering. He can't be trusted on August elections. He can't be trusted on voter power. He can't be trusted on the Ohio Constitution. He is one of the most cynical, debased, amoral politicians I've ever seen in my lifetime. And he wants a promotion to the U.S. Senate.
Right. He wants to kick Sherrod Brown out. Yeah. Well, let's not let that happen. Anyway, David, we have run out the clock. I really appreciate this. I wish you nothing but luck and hard work between now and the 8th, and I will be helping in all the ways I can.
Edwin, I really can't thank you enough for shining the spotlight like you do on this in Ohio and caring for us. And I'm honored and happy to talk to you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. All right, everybody. That was David Dewitt, editor-in-chief of the Ohio Capital Journal. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to turn to the economy next. Stay tuned.